President Trump has leaned into this war and related diplomacy for the last several days. And yet Congress is now keeping Jeffrey Epstein and that scandal in the headlines, even though, of course, it hurts their fellow Republican president. But a key figure who was in charge of the Bureau of Prisons and the Justice Department during Epstein's controversial death and the ensuing scandal over missing videos and all the rest, actually went under oath today, former Attorney General Barr, facing questions from a Republican-led committee. Now, he was subpoenaed along with some other witnesses. What's striking is that even though he has obvious vulnerabilities, indeed, at times he's admitted that mistakes were obviously made at that prison, he has rushed to the front of the list of people testifying. Now, he was the Attorney General, quote, during a time when Epstein was under investigation, the committee notes, and they had said they thought he might have knowledge or information relevant to the probe. And yet here's where things skip a beat, because Republicans want to appear to be investigating this. And yet, in some key ways, they also are now being pulled into a lot of happy talk about how maybe everything's just fine. Because the Republican chair, James Comer, says Barr basically defended Donald Trump and told them things that are consistent with the story they've been telling in public. But you got to go back all the way to 2019 when Barr was in charge, and he said he would look into whatever happened in that now suspicious prison cell death. Now, he admitted, as I mentioned, a perfect storm of screw-ups, and then said he would personally review security footage. And having done that, he said on his authority, his credibility, nobody entered Epstein's cell the night he died. Problem is, Barr said that years ago, and then finally later, selective video was released, but not the most important video, which Barr's DOJ still claims was lost. The video that finally came out in the second term has faced a lot of questions about not only missing material, but inconsistencies that would suggest, CBS among others, that Barr was overstating his conclusions, which is they didn't have enough evidence to rule out whether anyone might have gotten into that cell. I want to be clear. That doesn't mean somebody did go in. It just means that Barr overstated the case. And that raises more questions like, why is a sitting member of the government in a rush to apparently clear what his own Bureau of Prisons did at the time? Why overstate that? But if you remember Bill Barr, you might remember the Barr letter that misrepresented the actual Mueller report and many other ways that he's tried to have it both ways. Meanwhile, the DOJ says it will start turning over more Epstein documents to the Congress this week. We're joined by former U.S. Attorney Joyce Vance. Welcome.
Hey, Ari.
Nice to have you. We don't have a lot of detail yet about what Barr said. Not unlike the famous Barr letter, we're getting little political snippets. But let's start with the fact that the committee subpoenaed many people, including Eric Holder and President Clinton. Does it strike you as odd or raising questions that Barr rushed in there and they seem to have a very sort of aligned message strategy about whatever happened in there?
Well, someone had to go first, I suppose, and Barr is certainly a witness with knowledge about the relevant time period in the case. It's, I think, very difficult to figure out why, for instance, Eric Holder and Loretta Lynch were subpoenaed, why Hillary Clinton would have been subpoenaed. That feels more like it's about politics than about law. But I agree with you. You know, having Barr first sets the narrative, and the narrative today, based on what we have heard about his testimony, is that Donald Trump did nothing wrong. So yet again, we have Bill Barr standing by his guy, standing up for Donald Trump. And as you point out, during the Mueller investigation, Barr really whitewashed the conclusions of that report in a highly favorable way for Trump when it wasn't warranted. So I think it's appropriate for us to reserve judgment here until we learn more.
And that Bill Barr's opinion of his former boss is, I think, far less probative, far less essential to a thorough investigation than whether he was part of an effort to minimize the open questions there. And I've been very careful to say we don't know what happened. But the original video that was most dead-on view of the door remains missing. So you've got a guy saying, I reviewed the lesser video and I cleared everyone. But if this were a independent, 9/11 style or Warren Commission style review, you'd really want to double check that, because Barr had every reason to want to say that the DOJ didn't do anything really wrong.
So I think that there are two separate issues here, and one is Donald Trump, whether he appears in the Epstein files, and apparently Barr has said did nothing wrong. But you point out this earlier issue, which I think many people have been unwilling to let go of, the fact that there are missing minutes of video right at the most, I think, significant point in time has led people to have questions about the death of Jeffrey Epstein. Some of the facts involved in, I think, the mathematics, the calculus involved in how he allegedly committed suicide have caused people to have more questions. And so, look, you know, Bill Barr saw all the video, heard from all the witnesses, reached the conclusion that he reached, but perhaps more important than that conclusion would be hearing him explain why he believes it's valid, given the problems with missing evidence that can't be accounted for.
Yeah, and here was Comer now. We'll play that. Take a look.
There have to be a lot of documents. So I'm under the impression that they're gathering all these documents, and that's what the subpoena called for. And I think the administration knows this is what Congress wants, Republicans and Democrats. And I think President Trump has said clearly he wants to, release all the documents. So we're going to get the documents.
Is it odd that Comer is echoing Donald Trump's claim he wants to release documents that he has refused to release? And now they're playing a classic Washington game of saying, well, we'll move them from this building to that building. We'll move.
Republican House Oversight Committee Chairman James Comer says the Justice Department will start sharing Epstein-related files with his committee as soon as this Friday. The Oversight Committee also questioned its first high-profile witness, former U.S. Attorney General William Barr, about convicted sex trafficker Jeffrey Epstein. CNN senior justice correspondent Evan Perez joins us. So this deposition happened behind closed doors, but Republican Oversight Committee Chairman James Comer did share some of what Barr testified about. Bring us in.
Yeah, well, Jim Comer is, being forced really to do these depositions because Republicans want some answers. And as you remember, Mike Johnson, the Speaker, had delayed an effort that was made in the House to actually force these records to be coming out. And so now you have Bill Barr, who came in today. He was in there for several hours. Among the things that he emerged from this was that obviously, Jeffrey Epstein committed suicide. That's what the Justice Department has found. That remains the finding. And according to this deposition, that's what Barr knew from his own investigation. He also said that he didn't find anything when he reviewed these files, anything to indicate that Donald Trump did anything wrong as part of his long-time friendship with Jeffrey Epstein. Listen to Chairman Comer talk about this.
Barr said he's never seen any information that showed that he was in the files, and that he would be shocked if there was anything pertaining to President Trump that was negative that the Biden administration wouldn't have leaked out prior to the presidential election.
Look, no big surprises from Bill Barr, and we always anticipated that he had very limited information about what is in these files. And so, the pressure still is on, Pamela, for these files to be turned over to the Republicans there who have subpoenaed it, and also for the public eventually perhaps to see some of this.
It struck me who isn't on the list for subpoenas, and that would be Alex Acosta, right? He was the former federal prosecutor who struck that sweetheart deal for Jeffrey Epstein back in 2008, who was in the first Trump administration, right? Right.
He was the labor secretary in the Trump administration. But you do have a number of people like Merrick Garland, the former attorney general. You have Jim Comey, the FBI director, who is overseeing some of this early part of this investigation. Hillary and Bill Clinton are also on the list of people to be deposed. And it's not clear where this is going and what they expect to get from this. We do know, Pamela, that in the last few days, FBI agents who spent weeks going through those files in the Epstein investigation, they were told to make sure everything was saved because it appears in preparation for these documents to be turned over to the House that has subpoenaed them.
So is the expectation all of the documents will be turned over?
The expectation at this point is that nothing is going to be withheld. There are going to be redactions, but we don't know until this is over whether they're going to turn over everything.
All right, Evan Perez, thank you so much. Joining us now is James Marsh. He is an attorney representing some of Epstein's victims. Thank you for joining us. I first just want to get to what I was talking to Evan about, that DOJ is preparing to potentially hand over all of the Epstein files to the House Oversight Committee, of course, with redactions. What is your reaction to that?
That's very good news. I think the key to understanding the who in Epstein is to really learn about the how. And this is a process where we're going to start seeing records from the FBI. We're going to start, at least in my client's situation, her complaint goes back to the mid-90s. Her FBI file is 30 years old. And if you really want to unpack what happened here on how Epstein gained his power and influence, you really have to go back to that period of time, the mid-1990s, where he was an unindicted co-conspirator in the Southern District of New York in 1996, the Tower financial scam. And I'd really like to see Mary Jo White, who was not only the U.S. attorney in New York at the time, but she went on to become the SEC commissioner, which is the agency that brought that case. So I think we need to go back a little bit farther, 10 more years prior to many of these witnesses' knowledge, and really start learning about how Jeffrey Epstein.
Everything Donald tried to do to stop this has failed. I'm not going to suggest that this is the smoking gun. This hearing is going to be what ultimately dooms Donald, but it's certainly something that's going to hurt him a little bit. It's going to take a few hit points off of him, right? And he doesn't want this. He's been trying to stop this. He's been on the one hand trying to say, oh, we want transparency, blah, 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 to try to give a bone to his rabid MAGA base. But in actuality, trying to stop any real transparency that Trump can't fully control. And the thing with Bill Barr is you don't want to romanticize Bill Barr. Because Bill Barr, when he was, with Trump, did a lot of bad stuff for Donald Trump. Did a lot. Right up until the end with Trump, except in those final few months when publicly he very much broke with Trump on the question of January 6th, right? He was like, look, Donald, we looked into it. There's no proof to any of your claims. Even if there was proof for some of them, and there wasn't, but even if there was, the things that you're whining about would never have constituted, say, 10,000 votes in the state of Georgia, let alone the votes needed to flip the other essential states like Pennsylvania, Michigan, and on and on and on. And so I'm out. And he basically, at that point, he sort of left because he didn't want to be, whether it's because he had a moral issue or didn't want to get disbarred and or caught into criminal trouble that everyone was caught up in, that was sort of at the top of that scheme. He left. And so in many ways, he is not loyal to Donald Trump, at least not anymore. And there's no guarantee that he will take any sort of action to protect Trump at the expense of, one, his own safety, and two, putting forward a narrative that he feels is true. He has no need to lie for Trump now, no motivation, nothing to gain. This man isn't someone Donald controls anymore.